you considered the messages your outfits send? What do you think your clothes say about you? See, style is about the clothes, but it's not really about the clothes. Every day you make choices about what you're going to wear, but what are you communicating? Welcome to Above and Beyond Style. I'm your host, Maria DiLorenzo, and in 2019, I founded MFD Style, where I provide a unique, intuitive approach to personal styling for those ready to embrace a more meaningful look. With this podcast, I'll uncover key elements of where spirituality, psychology, and style intersect, revealing how you can make intentional wardrobe choices that reflect who you really are. So let me ask you, are you ready to transform into your authentic self? Then it's time. Come with me on this journey, and together we'll take your style above and beyond style. Hey everybody, welcome back to Above and Beyond Style. This week I want to talk to you a little bit about getting out of a style rut. And I imagine this probably hits home with many of us for all sorts of reasons, but one in particular because of the pandemic, and recognizing that the last couple years have been a really interesting time about getting dressed, where, you know, when everything sort of shut down and we were perhaps forced to do more remote work or working from home, I think there was this initial sort of perhaps joy even in dressing more casually and not having to get up and get dressed and be out the door, and embracing perhaps the business formal or the business casual looks that many of us might need to sport day to day for the kind of life that we lead. And so the pandemic gave us permission even to embrace the more athleisure life and wear our joggers and our sweatsuits and our sweatshirts and, you know, all the various clothes that were sort of cozy and comfortable and much easier to kind of hang around in our homes while we were getting both home and work and life all done in the same place. And while I think that perhaps felt good for a period of time, I have noticed and heard, you know, I think the longevity one of the pandemic has obviously created a lot of feelings of some exhaustion and not really knowing sort of the end game here. And while things do at this moment feel like they're on the upside, which is amazing, but, you know, there's always this sort of uncertainty about, is this sort of how life is going to go, and what will normal life, quote unquote, look like again? And how will our dressing and how we get dressed, you know, reflect whatever that new norm looks like? And I think part of this exercise, if you will, of going through the pandemic and having a variety of different things that we've had to adjust and accommodate for, our wardrobe has definitely been one of them. And I've heard from family, friends, clients, neighbors, I mean, you name it, even just like the casual acquaintance in the grocery store will talk about, you know, this has kind of been a tough time to figure out like what to get dressed in, and how do we really embrace perhaps again what that new norm might be looking like. And I think what's happened in some ways, our wardrobes feel a little lackluster, and it's sort of like we're in a bit of a style rut because we've maybe now been wearing our athleisure a bit too long, or and it might feel good, even exciting to, you know, get dressed again and go to events and see people and connect. And, you know, for women, if you wear makeup, you know, to put your makeup back on, and just whatever the things are that kind of help us feel re-engaged with our daily life. I think the wardrobe piece has taken a really interesting hit amidst other things in the course of this pandemic. And so these trends, if you will, around athleisure and comfortable wear and some of those things sort of lost their appeal for some people. And I've heard that time and time again as I'm starting to reconnect and, you know, obviously still doing some work virtually, but I am able to go back into people's homes a bit more comfortably and have these conversations about, well, what does your wardrobe look like now? Given whatever your lifestyle or however things are going for you now, what does it need to look like to be able to support you in the lifestyle that you're leading at this present time, because my guess is it probably looks a little different than it did even just 2 years ago. So I've heard this sort of comment around, I feel like I'm a bit in a style rut. Like I just don't really know if there's anything in my closet that really excites me anymore. I sort of open up, if you have doors to your closet or drawers to the dresser, like clothes just sort of feel like they look the same, and maybe they've lost their shine and their appeal, and there just may not be a whole lot of energy or excitement around wearing anything anymore. And first of all, let me normalize that, because I think that is really normal. And I think because of these circumstances of the last couple years, we've had some extraordinary impact, and how we look at our clothes and how we feel in our clothes has been one of those things that definitely has taken an effect on. So part of what I want to talk to you today is about helping you get out of that style rut a little bit, and give you a few ideas and even some strategies that might help you look at your clothes a little differently, so that you can maybe re-engage in a new way. And if you are active and re-engaged in your life again, and I hope that you are, that you will have sort of a fresh take on your clothes and not have to feel like you have to buy new. And I think that's a real important part of the message underneath this around style ruts. And oftentimes people feel like, I'm just sort of tired of seeing the same clothes. So they feel that pressure, or even that desire to go buy something new, because it feels good and it's nice to have something fresh and new in our closet sometimes. And you might find yourself more attracted to or drawn to wearing that more often. And while yes, that might be one approach, I really want to help you, again, reimagine your clothes and help you see that there are some real easy ways that you can get yourself out of a style rut and maybe start to kind of reconnect with your clothes again and see them in different combinations or new pairings that might make it feel more fresh, that you perhaps haven't felt for a couple years now. So one of the things that I noticed, and I won't spend a ton of time on this today, but I do want to talk about this concept that has really started to show up a bit more in mainstream media. I've seen it, on a lot of the style blogs, and it's kind of in the cultural conversation around dressing. And I don't know if you've heard of the term dopamine dressing, and I want to talk to you a little bit about that today. So you're probably familiar with dopamine as that type of neurotransmitter that's made in the brain that acts as that chemical messenger between neurons. And most commonly, I think we know dopamine is that like chemical that's released when our brain is expecting a reward. So it plays a pretty big role in how we feel and experience pleasure and joy and even anticipation. And so part of the thing that has come out now is about when you wear something you love that maybe brings you confidence and makes you feel happy or feel good, they've talked about that some aspect of that happiness actually stems from that dopamine hit. And the psychological benefits then of stepping out in something that actually brings us pleasure really are kind of twofold. The first is when we wear something that brings us joy, that area in the brain is activated, right? So the dopamine hit is real, and it gives us that rush and feeling of happiness that, secondly, we want to continuously feel that experience. And that's why they talk about the hit of the dopamine, right? Like it's a little bit like it's an addictive feeling, right? That you get that sense of like, ooh, that felt good. I want to do that again. So color is one of the ways that really can help us boost our mood and perhaps change the way that we look at clothes and feel about our clothes. And so leveraging some of the choices that you have around color can be a really powerful method for you to kind of get out of your style rut. And I'm not going to spend, again, too much time on like the psychology of color, because that could really be a whole other episode. And I might bring in and invite a more of an expert on this topic than myself. But I want you to know that, there's a lot of literature out there around color psychology and sort of the emotions and feelings that it elicits for us in our bodies and what it does biologically and neurochemically in our bodies for different reasons at different times in our lives, etc. And it's really, if you have any interest in it, this is kind of a fascinating space to really think about the way that color plays such an important part of our lives, particularly for those of us that have the ability of vision and being able to see and to see color. Because again, if you remember back to my very first episode where I talked about my very first client who was colorblind and experiencing this world without the leverage and the power of color. And so learning some strategies and techniques to leverage color when he might not have been able to see it as I see it, or as you see it. So the ways that color plays into our getting out of our style rut, I think can be really powerful. And I want you to think about for yourself some of the associations that you might have with color. And again, some of this might be different for different folks. So like many people might see bright pinks or reds or yellows and oranges and sort of feel that surge of energy and joy. Like I think those are colors that tend to be associated with some of those emotions and feelings. Others might feel that way with greens and blues and purples, right? It's really that we could make an argument in many ways that any color could spark joy, given the association that you might have with that specific color. And really the point of dopamine dressing is that you do actually get a chemical hit of pleasure when you use colors strategically for getting dressed. And so, when I talk about color, I want you to just imagine for yourself, even as you go into your closet and maybe take a little review of the things you have, you might notice certain color patterns that are in your closet. Like you might favor a particular shade of a color, or even colors in a tonal way. Like I was in a closet with a new client a few weeks ago, and I was just noticing the scope of the color in her fall and winter wardrobe were all beautiful jewel tones, like deep purples and teals, and it was really obvious that tone really appealed to her, and it was a beautiful color, very complementary to her hair and skin tone, etc. But you could tell that she garnered a lot of joy out of those colors. And I think for all of us, maybe you haven't really noticed, but we might have some, patterns or different preferences in our colors palette in our closet that we might want to really pay attention to and leverage. That might help spark that little bit of joy again. And, really getting reacquainted with color in a way that maybe you've put aside for a while. And I hear a lot of people talk about just for the ease and the simplicity of getting dressed in, in all black or even all white. And again, no judgment or shame in that. It's really just about helping you notice, is there a change for you when you look or engage with a particular color that might help get you out of that style rut. And so when you say to yourself, like, gosh, I really love that beautiful teal blue that's just rich and saturated in color, and you look at it and it just makes you feel good. I think these are one of those moments where like you should draw from those colors in your wardrobe to really help kind of reignite that excitement or whatever that joy might be that you might feel in wearing that particular color. And dopamine dressing doesn't necessarily have to be explicitly about color. It can also be really just from wearing something that you truly love and how it might feel on your skin or your body. And I hear this a lot from clients who talk about cashmere, right? For anybody that might be a fan of cashmere, that like the softness and the way that it feels on their skin really does elicit a little bit of that dopamine hit and gives them that pleasure and that feeling of being kind of nurtured and soft and cozy. And so, whether it's the cashmere or I'll just throw my mom as an example in here. She loves nautical stripes. And so every time she pulls out her navy and white nautical stripes every summer, I know she gets a real hit of joy and just feeling good in those clothes, because that's something that is really appealing to her and she always just feels really good in. So the specific item, for any personal reason, really can be attributed to that dopamine hit. And so that might be a really easy way for you to kind of go back into your closet and, again, take a little review of what are those things, whether it's the color or the fabric or the way it feels. What are those things that actually do give you that sense of joy and pleasure again? And you might find yourself wearing that more and more, and you'll notice that perhaps that shift in your emotion and your feelings about it. So I want to give you a couple strategies about that might really help you get out of a style rut that could be used. And the first for me, and I maybe talked about this in a previous episode, but when you go into a clothing store, and if it's a store that perhaps you've frequented, multiple times, and guilty as charged here, I will say that I go to Target pretty regularly for different reasons, not for style exclusively, but just for household items or grocery items. But I do pay attention and look at the clothes when I walk through, and I notice when the clothes move around. And I think one of the things that perhaps we underestimate in our own closets that merchants do really well, and perhaps retail stores, is that they physically move their clothes around, because it allows you to notice and see things differently that you maybe didn't see before. Like, oh, that shirt was sort of at the back of the rack before, and now it's up in front, and oh, I'm seeing it differently. I didn't notice it the first time around. Well, the same approach could be applied to your own closets. And I don't know if you have movable, shelving or even the bars that hold your hanging items in your closet. If any of those things can be rearranged or changed, that could be a really fun and easy way to kind of move some of those things around and physically move your clothes. So if you group your clothes by items, so if you keep all your shirts together, all your pants together, put them in a different physical location in your closet. Just give them a new place and a position. And I promise it will make you feel different about your clothes. You will somewhat notice and sort of pay attention to different things, because you just sort of always saw your shirts there, and you knew that one shirt always lives kind of towards the back, and you really don't pay attention to it, right? So there's new ways that reorganizing and sort of repositioning your clothes can give you kind of that new, fresh feeling, again, without having to buy new items, but can give you the new perspective and maybe get you out of that style rut. The other thing that I really like to do once I've kind of reorganized or perhaps moved clothes around, and even if you have a static closet that you don't have the ability to sort of shift the way they're organized, you can still move the actual clothes in different ways. I think that's one of the best parts of when you hire me as a stylist. I love to come in and create new combinations for you. And it's easy, I think, sometimes when you have an objective person come in with a fresh set of eyes and don't always look at your clothes every day in the same ways that you do. But for me to see this shirt with this pair of pants and with this jacket, that you're like, oh my gosh, I never would have put those three things together and they look great. And so sometimes you just need that objective set of eyes to be able to look at the clothes and recognize I really do actually have a great combination of items to play with here. It's just being able to see them in new combinations that might give you that new, fresh perspective on what you have in your closet. And I'm a big proponent also of changing the function of an item. So if you've traditionally worn, if there's a tunic with a belt that you've always worn it the same way, perhaps you don't wear the belt. Perhaps you wear the belt as a scarf around your neck instead of at the waist. Maybe the tunic can be tied as opposed to wearing it straight down. There's lots of different ways that a particular item might actually be able to be worn in a new and different way that you haven't ever done before. Or maybe you never even really thought to wear it differently. One of my favorite little tricks is even just with a V-neck cardigan sweater, where you traditionally would wear the V-neck in the front, to flip it around and wear it in the back. And it's kind of a fun, sexy way of wearing a cardigan that we maybe traditionally don't think about. So that helps you see your closet and the actual individual pieces with a little bit different set of eyes, again, when you can notice different function. And again, if you need help identifying some new functions for items, I really feel like that's one of my superpowers, because I love to kind of imagine a piece of clothing in a new and a different way than it was perhaps intended. And the last thing I'll suggest for helping you get out of a style rut is experimenting with some trends. And I think everybody maybe feels a little differently about trends, and it's like, well, I don't really want to, I don't want to spend too much money, or I don't want to necessarily go too deep in a trend if it's not going to last a long time. And all of that I can totally appreciate. And the real beauty of a trend is it's a little bit of fun and it's playful, and oftentimes it just helps maybe get you over that hump of the style rut. So maybe there's something as simple as, we were talking about color before, like maybe introduce a new fun color that has been part of that particular season. And so like right now, for example, we're seeing like a lot of really bold, bright, beautiful colors in the ethos around style. So we're seeing a lot of like fuchsia pinks and lime greens, and traditionally those are not colors that I might find myself drawn to, but maybe I want to introduce a lime green scarf, or something that just is like a pop and something different that might just, again, kind of push me over a little bit to give me that spark and enthusiasm around my clothing that can often happen and be played with trends. And so some of the other trends we're seeing right now, and we're going into like style for spring and summer, is around like cutouts. We're seeing a lot of cutouts in clothing on the sides and in the back, and all that is great. And I think, again, you can play around with a trend if it feels like something you might like to experiment with. And it doesn't have to be something that you spend a lot of money on, but you can really embrace it at the level with which you want to. And so, using trends strategically can be a nice way to help us get out of that style rut and give us a little bit of sort of the freshness that we might be craving in our closets. So I hope this has been helpful. I hope you get a chance to take a little time with your closet and maybe experiment a little bit about some of the things that are in your wardrobe, and starting to really, build yourself some excitement and that spark again, where you may have been feeling a bit lackluster about your wardrobe, and help yourself really get out of that style rut. So thanks, everybody. I'll see you next time. Thanks so much for listening today. If you enjoyed what you've heard, I would appreciate you taking the time to leave a review on the podcasting platform you're using, and share this episode with others who you think might really enjoy these conversations about personal style. For more information all about MFD Style services, you can find me on the web at mfdstyle.com, on Instagram at mfd_style, where I post almost 5 days a week, or send me an email at maria@mfdstyle.com. I also have a weekly email I send to subscribers, so I will include the link to that sign up in the show notes. So until next time, friends, remember to love yourself, and then love yourself some more.